Udu, the chair still rocked from where she sat, begging the cowboy to save a mother she loved like fire. Welcome back to our storytelling community. Before we embark on today's gripping tale from the untamed American frontier, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. Your support keeps these stories coming, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us what country or state you're tuning in from. We have listeners from all corners of the world. Now, prepare yourself for a story of fierce love, desperate courage, and the lengths we'll go to save those who matter most. The August heat shimmered off the dusty main street of Cedar Falls, Arizona Territory, as Marcus Mac Sullivan guided his sorrel gelding toward the town's only saloon. 3 weeks of driving cattle across the desert had left him trail-worn, sun-baked, and desperately in need of a cold beer and a hot meal. At 28, Mac had been riding the frontier for over a decade, and he could read a town's character within minutes of arrival. Cedar Falls had the tired, slightly desperate air of a place that had seen better days. The Lost Horseshoe Saloon sat at the end of the street, its bat-wing doors hanging slightly askew and paint peeling from its weathered facade. Mac dismounted, tied his horse to the hitching post, and was about to push through the doors when he heard it, the sound of someone running hard down the wooden sidewalk behind him. He turned to see a young woman racing toward him, her long, dark hair streaming behind her and her blue calico dress hiking up as she ran. She couldn't have been more than 17 or 18, with the kind of natural beauty that frontier life couldn't quite diminish, despite the obvious signs of hardship in her face. "Mister, please, mister, wait!" she called out, her voice cracking with desperation. Mac paused, his hand still on the saloon door. The girl skidded to a stop in front of him, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. Her brown eyes were wide with panic, and Mac could see tear tracks cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "Please," she gasped, reaching out to clutch at his shirt sleeve. "You have to help me. You look like someone who knows how to fight, how to handle trouble. I'll pay you anything, everything I have." Mac studied her face, noting the desperation there, but also something else, a fierce determination that reminded him of a cornered wildcat. "Slow down there, miss. What's your name, and what kind of trouble are we talking about?" "Lily," she said quickly. "Lily Chen. And it's my mother. They took her. The Garrett brothers took her. And they're going to hurt her if I don't." Her voice broke, and she swayed on her feet as if she might collapse. Mac instinctively reached out to steady her, noting how thin she was beneath the worn fabric of her dress. "Easy now," Mac said gently. Why don't we sit down and you can tell me the whole story?" There was a wooden bench outside the general store next to the saloon, and Mac guided Lily to it. As she sank down, he noticed she kept glancing toward the north end of town, her hands twisting in her lap. "Start from the beginning," Mac said, settling beside her. "Who's your mother, and who are the Garrett brothers?" Lily took a shaky breath. "And her name is Rose Chen. Well, Rose Murphy now, but she kept my father's name for me. She's not my birth mother, but she's the only mother I've ever known. She found me when I was just a baby, abandoned behind the Chinese laundry in Tucson. My father had been killed, and my birth mother died having me. Rose took me in, raised me as her own." Mac nodded, understanding more than Lily probably realized. Frontier families were often built from necessity rather than blood, and love could create bonds stronger than any legal document. "Rose runs the boarding house here in town," Lily continued. "It's just the two of us, and we've been doing fine, making an honest living. But 3 weeks ago, the Garrett brothers rode into town." Mac's jaw tightened. He'd heard of the Garretts, Jake and Tommy Garrett, a pair of brothers who made their living through intimidation, theft, and worse. They moved from town to town, staying just ahead of the law, preying on communities too small or too isolated to effectively fight back. "What do they want?" Mac asked, though he suspected he already knew. "They decided they liked our boarding house," Lily said bitterly. "Said it would make a perfect headquarters for their business operations. They offered to buy it for a fraction of what it's worth, and when Rose refused, they started making threats." "What kind of threats?" Lily's hands clenched into fists. "At first, just talk about how accidents could happen to women living alone, how businesses could burn down in the middle of the night. But this morning, her voice broke again. This morning what, Lily? This morning they came to the house while I was at the market. When I got back, the front door was standing open and Rose was gone. There was a note on the kitchen table. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Mac unfolded it and read the crude handwriting. If you want to see your mama again, bring the deed to your property to the old mine north of town by sunset. Come alone. No law. Mac felt anger building in his chest. He'd seen this kind of cowardly intimidation before, and it never failed to disgust him. How long ago was this? 2 hours? Maybe 3. I ran all over town looking for someone to help, but Lily's voice trailed off. But what? The sheriff is Jake Garrett's cousin, Lily said quietly, and most of the men in town are either too scared or too old to stand up to the Garretts. I was about to give up when I saw you ride in. You look like a man who's not afraid of anything. Mac studied Lily's face, seeing the desperate hope there. The smart thing would be to finish his drink, get a good night's sleep, and ride out in the morning. The Garrett brothers were dangerous men with a reputation for violence, and getting involved in local disputes was a good way to end up dead. But looking at this young woman, who clearly loved her adoptive mother with the fierce devotion of a daughter, Mac found himself remembering his own adoptive family, the rancher and his wife, who had taken in a half-starved orphan boy and given him a chance at life. Lily, Mac said carefully, I'm just one man. The Garretts have a gang, and they know this country better than I do. Even if I could help, the odds would be pretty steep. Lily's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the scared young woman she really was. I know, she whispered. I know it's asking too much. It's just Rose is all I have in the world. She saved my life when I was a baby, and she's loved me every day since. I can't just let them take her. The raw emotion in Lily's voice hit Mac like a physical blow. He thought about Rose Murphy, a woman he'd never met, who had opened her heart to an abandoned child and loved her as her own. He thought about the Garrett brothers, using that love as a weapon to steal what they wanted. Tell me about this old mine, Mac said finally. Lily's head snapped up, hope flickering in her eyes. Does that mean... It means I'm going to need more information before I decide anything, Mac said. But I'm listening. For the next hour, Lily told Mac everything she knew about the area around Cedar Falls, the layout of the abandoned mine, and the habits of the Garrett brothers. Mac asked detailed questions, his mind already working through possible approaches to the problem. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Mac made his decision. All right, Lily, he said, standing up from the bench. Here's what we're going to do. First thing, Mac said, his voice taking on the calm, authoritative tone of a man accustomed to making life-or-death decisions. We need to scout that mine before the sun sets. I'm not walking into anything blind. Lily nodded eagerly. I know a trail that gets close without being seen. Rose and I used to pick berries up there in the spring. Mac studied the young woman's face, noting the mixture of fear and determination in her dark eyes. Lily, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is dangerous. These men won't hesitate to kill both you and your mother if they feel cornered. Are you sure you're ready for this? Rose would do it for me, Lily said simply. She'd walk through fire if I needed her to. I won't do any less for her. Mac felt something stir in his chest at the fierce loyalty in her voice. All right then, but we do this my way, understand? No heroics, no charging in without thinking. We stick to the plan. They spent the next 20 minutes gathering supplies. Mac checked his weapons, a Colt 45 on his hip and a Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard, while Lily packed water and what little food she could find in her boarding house kitchen. Now tell me more about Rose, Mac said, as they prepared to leave town. How did she end up running a boarding house in Cedar Falls? Lily's face softened as she talked about her adoptive mother. She came here about 15 years ago with her first husband, Patrick Murphy. He was a miner, convinced he was going to strike it rich in the territorial silver mines. When he died in a cave-in, Rose could have gone back east to her family, but she stayed, said the desert had gotten into her blood, and she took you in when you were a baby. I was maybe 6 months old when she found me, Lily said. The Chinese workers who'd been caring for me after my parents died had been run out of Tucson by some of the locals. They were too scared to take a baby with them, So they left me behind the laundry with a note explaining who I was. Mac nodded, understanding the ugly prejudice that often drove Chinese families from frontier towns. Rose could have turned you over to an orphanage. She says she took one look at me and knew I was meant to be hers, Lily said, with a small smile. And she always tells people that I chose her as much as she chose me. As they rode north out of Cedar Falls, Mac found himself building a mental picture of Rose Murphy, a woman with enough strength to survive alone on the frontier, enough compassion to take in an abandoned child, and enough determination to build a business that could support them both. The trail to the old mine wound through rocky hills dotted with scrub brush and stunted juniper trees. The heat was still oppressive even as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, and Mac could feel sweat soaking through his shirt. "There," Lily said softly, pointing toward a cluster of weathered wooden buildings visible through a gap in the rocks. "That's the Esperanza mine. It played out about 5 years ago." Mac studied the layout through his spyglass. The main shaft entrance was built into the side of a hill, with several smaller buildings scattered around it, probably an office, storage sheds, and living quarters for the miners. It was an isolated location, perfect for the Garrett's purposes. "I see 2 horses tied up near the main building," Mac reported. "No sign of guards, but that doesn't mean they're not there. What's the plan?" Lily asked. Mac lowered the spyglass and looked at her seriously. The plan is that you stay here while I go down and assess the situation. Once I know where your mother is and how many men we're dealing with, I'll come back and we'll figure out our next move." "No," Lily said firmly. "I'm coming with you." "Lily, this isn't a discussion. These men are killers, and they have my mother," Lily interrupted. "I know you think I'll just get in the way, but I won't. I can shoot, I can ride, and I know Rose better than anyone. If she's hurt or scared, she'll respond to my voice better than to a stranger's." Mac studied her face, seeing the stubborn set of her jaw that reminded him of every strong-willed frontier woman he'd ever known. "You ever killed a man, Lily?" The question hung in the air between them. Lily was quiet for a long moment before answering. "No, but if they've hurt Rose, I will." There was something in her voice, a cold certainty that told Mac she meant every word. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of people who'd been pushed past their breaking point. It was dangerous, but it was also useful. "All right," Mac said finally, "but we do this, careful-like. No shooting, unless there's no other choice. And you follow my lead exactly." "Agreed." "Agreed." As they made their way down the rocky slope toward the mine, Mac outlined his plan. "We'll circle around to the back of the main building. If we can get close enough, we might be able to see or hear something that tells us where they're keeping Rose." The sun was hanging low on the horizon now, casting long shadows across the abandoned mine site. Mac and Lily moved carefully from rock to rock, using the terrain to stay hidden as they approached the buildings. When they were about 50 yards from the largest structure, Mac held up his hand for Lily to stop. Voices were carrying on the evening air, rough male voices that sounded relaxed, almost casual. "Told you this would be easy money," one voice was saying. "That Chinese girl will hand over the deed without a fight once she sees what we're willing to do to Mama. Hope she shows up soon," another voice replied, getting tired of listening to the old woman's crying. Mac felt Lily tense beside him at the casual cruelty in the man's voice. He put a warning hand on her arm, feeling the anger radiating from her small frame. "Easy," he whispered. "We know she's alive. That's what matters right now." They crept closer until they could see through a gap in the wooden planks of the building's back wall. Inside, Mac could make out 3 figures, 2 men sitting at a rough table playing cards, and a woman tied to a chair near the far wall. Even from this distance, Mac could see that Rose Murphy was a handsome woman in her 40s, with graying brown hair and a face that spoke of both kindness and strength. Her dress was torn, and there was a bruise on her cheek, but she sat upright in the chair with a dignity that neither ropes nor threats could diminish. Lily made a small sound of distress when she saw her mother's condition, and Mac quickly pulled her back from the wall. 3 men, he whispered. 2 inside, probably 1 more keeping watch somewhere. Your mother's hurt, but not badly. We can get her out. How? Lily asked. Mac was quiet for a moment, considering their options. A direct assault was too risky. Too many things could go wrong, and Rose could end up caught in the crossfire. But there might be another way. The Garretts are expecting you to show up with the deed, Mac said slowly. Paul, what if we give them what they're expecting? Lily looked confused. You want me to hand over our property? I want you to appear to hand it over, Mac corrected. You go in the front door, act scared and defeated, hand over the deed. While they're focused on you, I'll circle around back and get your mother out through that gap in the wall. What if they don't let her go once they have the deed? Mac's expression hardened. And then we move to Plan B. And Plan B involves a lot more shooting. As the last light of day faded from the sky, Mac and Lily prepared to put their plan into action. Mac checked his weapons one more time, while Lily smoothed her hair and tried to compose her face into an expression of defeated submission. Remember, Mac said quietly, keep them talking as long as you can. The more time you give me, the better chance we have of getting Rose out safely. Lily nodded, clutching the deed to the boarding house in her trembling hands. What if something goes wrong? Then you hit the ground and stay down until the shooting stops, Mac said grimly. But nothing's gonna go wrong. We're gonna get your mother back, Lily. I promise you that. As Lily walked toward the front of the building, her footsteps echoing in the still night air, Mac began his careful approach to the back wall. Through the gap in the planks, he could see Rose Murphy lifting her head, hope flickering in her eyes as she heard familiar footsteps approaching. The plan was in motion, and there would be no turning back now. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs as she approached the front entrance of the main building. The wooden door hung slightly ajar, and yellow lamplight spilled out into the gathering darkness. She could hear the voices inside more clearly now, rough laughter, and the shuffle of cards being dealt. Taking a deep breath, Lily forced her shoulders to slump and arranged her features into what she hoped looked like defeat. Then she knocked on the doorframe. "Hello?" she called out, letting her voice crack with apparent fear. "I'm here about my mother." The conversation inside stopped abruptly. Heavy footsteps approached the door, and it swung open to reveal a large man with a scraggly beard and cold, calculating eyes. This had to be Jake Garrett, the older of the two brothers. "Well, well," Jake said with a cruel smile. "Little Lily Chen, right on time. Come on in, girl. We've been waiting for you." Lily stepped into the building, her eyes immediately going to Rose, who was still tied to the chair against the far wall. Their eyes met across the room, and Lily saw her mother's face flood with relief, quickly followed by alarm as Rose realized her daughter had walked into danger. "Lily, no," Rose said weakly. "You shouldn't have come." "Shut up," the second man snapped. This would be Tommy Garrett, younger than his brother but with the same mean eyes. "She's here to do business, ain't you, girl?" Lily held up the deed with shaking hands. "Please, just let her go. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Jake snatched the document from her hands and studied it by lamplight. "Looks real enough," he said after a moment. "Nice little property you got there. Going to make us a fine headquarters." "You have what you wanted," Lily said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Now let my mother go." Jake laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, little girl, you really think it's going to be that easy? See, me and Tommy, we've been talking, and we figure a boarding house needs someone who knows how to run it. Your mama here seems like just the type." Rose's face went pale. "Lily, run," she whispered. "And nobody's running anywhere," Tommy said, standing up from his chair. "In fact, I think we're going to keep both of you. A woman and her daughter can do a lot of work, and they're real motivated to keep each other safe." Lily felt ice form in her stomach as she realized the full extent of the trap. The Garretts had never intended to simply take the property and leave. They wanted slaves to run it for them. "You can't do this," Lily said, backing toward the door. "People in town will notice we're missing. People in town will mind their own business if they know what's good for them," Jake said, moving to block her escape route. "Besides, my cousin the sheriff will make sure nobody asks too many questions." Outside, Mac had reached the back wall of the building. Through the gap in the planks, he could see everything unfolding inside. Rose was about 20 feet from his position, and there was enough space between the wall boards for him to squeeze through if he could get the ropes off her quietly. The problem was the third man Mac had been expecting. As he studied the scene inside, Mac realized there were only the two Garrett brothers present. Either he'd been wrong about the third man, or the missing gang member was somewhere else entirely. Mac decided he couldn't wait any longer. Lily was in immediate danger, and every second increased the risk that the situation would spiral completely out of control. Carefully, Mac worked one of the loose boards free from the wall, creating an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through. The old wood creaked softly, but the sound was covered by the voices inside. Mac slipped through the gap and moved silently toward Rose's chair. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and he quickly pressed a finger to his lips for silence. With practiced efficiency, Mac began working on the ropes that bound her arms. Inside the front of the building, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Tommy, tie the girl up," Jake ordered. "We'll decide what to do with them both later." "No," Lily said, dodging away from Tommy's reaching hands. "You have the deed. That was the deal. The deal was whatever we say it was," Jake snarled, lunging for her. Lily was young and quick, but the room was small and there was nowhere to run. Tommy caught her arm and twisted it behind her back, making her cry out in pain. That cry was all Mac needed to hear. The ropes around Rose's arms came free, and he quickly helped her to her feet. "Can you walk?" he whispered. Rose nodded, though Mac could see she was shaky from hours of being tied up. "Lily," she whispered, "don't leave without Lily." "We're getting you both out," Mac promised. "But we need to move now." They started toward the gap in the wall, but Rose's legs, numb from being bound, gave out beneath her. She stumbled, knocking over a wooden crate that crashed to the floor with a loud bang. Inside the front room, all conversation stopped. "What was that?" Jake demanded. Tommy still had hold of Lily's arm, but his attention was focused on the back of the building. Sounded like it came from the back room. "Go check it out," Jake ordered. Mac cursed silently as he heard heavy footsteps approaching. There was no time to get Rose through the opening, and hiding was impossible in the small space. He helped Rose to her feet and drew his Colt, preparing for the confrontation he'd hoped to avoid. Tommy Garrett pushed through the door, separating the front and back rooms, his gun already in his hand. When he saw Mac and Rose, his eyes widened in surprise for just a moment. That moment was all Mac needed. His first shot took Tommy center mass, spinning the younger Garrett around and dropping him to the floor. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the confined space, and Mac's ears were ringing as he heard Jake Garrett's roar of rage from the front room. "Tommy!" "What the hell? Lily, get down!" Mac shouted, hoping the girl would have the sense to hit the floor. Jake appeared in the doorway, his gun blazing. Mac pushed Rose toward the wall opening and returned fire, his bullets splintering the wooden doorframe inches from Jake's head. "You son of a bitch!" Jake screamed. "You killed my brother, and I'll kill you too if you don't let the girl go," Mac replied, reloading quickly behind the cover of an overturned table. From the front room, Mac could hear Lily sobbing, but he couldn't tell if she was hurt or just terrified. Rose was halfway through the wall opening, moving as fast as her injured state would allow. "Jake Garrett!" Mac called out. "This doesn't have to end with more killing. Let the girl walk out of here, and we'll call it even." Jake's answer was another volley of gunfire that sent splinters flying around Mac's position. "Even? You killed my brother!" "Ain't nothing even about this." Mac realized there would be no reasoning with the man. Jake Garrett was beyond rational thought, consumed with grief and rage over his brother's death. This was going to end only one way. "Rose," Mac whispered urgently. "Are you clear?" "Almost," came her strained reply from outside the wall. Mac took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and prepared to end this fight once and for all. Mac counted to 3, then rolled out from behind the overturned table, his Colt aimed at the doorway where Jake Garrett would have to appear. The older Garrett brother was craftier than his deceased sibling. Instead of charging through the door, he was using the wall for cover, firing blind shots into the back room. "Lily!" Mac called out. "Can you hear me?" "I'm here," came Lily's frightened voice from the front room. "I'm behind the stove." At least she was alive and had found cover. Mac glanced toward the wall opening and saw that Rose had made it through safely. Now he just had to find a way to get to Lily without getting himself killed in the process. "Jake!" Mac shouted. "Your brother's dead, and your cousin the sheriff isn't coming to help you. Give it up!" "Go to hell," Jake responded, punctuating his words with more gunfire. Mac studied the layout of the building, looking for any advantage he could find. The structure was simple. Just 2 rooms connected by a single doorway. Jake controlled that doorway, which meant Mac was effectively trapped unless he could find another way around. Then Mac noticed something that made him smile grimly. In the corner of the back room, an old oil lamp sat on a wooden shelf, its flame flickering in the draft from the bullet holes. If Mac could create enough of a distraction. Moving quickly, Mac grabbed the lamp and hurled it against the far wall. The glass shattered, and oil splashed across the dry wooden planks, immediately catching fire. Within seconds, flames were licking up the wall, filling the room with smoke and dancing light. "What the hell?" Jake's voice carried a note of panic now. Mac used the confusion to his advantage, moving toward the doorway in a low crouch. The smoke was getting thicker, and he could hear Jake coughing in the front room. "Lily!" Mac called. "When I say go, you run for the door. Don't look back." "I can't see," Lily cried. "There's too much smoke." The fire was spreading faster than Mac had anticipated. The old, dry wood of the abandoned building was like kindling, and what had started as a distraction was quickly becoming a serious threat to all of them. Mac made his decision. Staying low to avoid the worst of the smoke, he charged through the doorway into the front room. Jake Garrett was pressed against the far wall, his gun raised, but his eyes were streaming from the smoke and his aim was wild. Mac's first shot went wide as Jake fired simultaneously, the bullet whining past Mac's ear, close enough to feel the heat. Mac's second shot found its mark. Jake Garrett crumpled against the wall, his gun clattering to the floor as he clutched his shoulder. "Lily!" Mac shouted through the thickening smoke. "Where are you?" "Here." Mac followed her voice and found Lily huddled behind the iron stove, coughing violently. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door just as a section of the back wall collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning debris. They burst out of the building into the cool night air, both gasping and coughing. Rose was waiting for them, and she immediately swept Lily into her arms. "Oh, my baby," Rose sobbed, holding her daughter tight. "I thought I'd lost you." Mac turned back toward the burning building, where he could hear Jake Garrett screaming for help. Despite everything the man had done, Mac couldn't leave him to burn alive. "Stay here," he told Rose and Lily, then plunged back into the smoke-filled building. He found Jake where he'd fallen, semi-conscious and bleeding from his shoulder wound. The fire was closing in from all sides, and the roof was beginning to sag ominously. "Come on," Mac grunted, hauling Jake to his feet. "Even bastards like you don't deserve to burn." Half carrying, half dragging the wounded outlaw, Mac made it back to the door just as the roof of the back room collapsed completely. They tumbled out onto the ground together, both men singed and smoke-blackened. Jake Garrett lay gasping on the dirt, staring up at Mac with a mixture of pain and confusion. "Why?" he wheezed. "Why'd you save me?" "Because that's what separates men from animals," Mac replied, checking Jake's wound. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, painful but not fatal. Rose appeared at Mac's side with strips of cloth torn from her dress. "Here," she said quietly, "for bandages." As Mac bound Jake's wound, he could hear horses approaching from the direction of town. Within minutes, a group of riders emerged from the darkness, led by a man wearing a tin star on his vest. "That'll be Sheriff Garrett," Lily said bitterly, but as the riders drew closer, Mac could see that the man with the badge wasn't the corrupt sheriff Lily had described. This was an older man with grey hair and honest eyes, accompanied by several armed townspeople. "I'm Deputy Marshal Ben Crawford," the man announced, dismounting. We got word there was trouble up here." "Deputy Marshal?" Mac asked, confused. "What happened to Sheriff Garrett?" Crawford's expression was grim. "Sheriff Garrett and 2 of his men tried to rob the stage that came through town this afternoon. They're all dead. Turns out there was a federal marshal on board, traveling incognito." Jake Garrett groaned from where he lay on the ground. "Danny's dead." "Dead as a doornail," Crawford confirmed. "Ma'am, when we searched his office, we found wanted posters for you and your brother. Seems you boys have been busy all across the territory." As Crawford and his men took Jake Garrett into custody, Mac found himself sitting on a rock with Rose and Lily, all 3 of them watching the boarding house burn in the distance. It's gone, Lily said quietly, staring at the flames. Everything we worked for. Rose put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. And buildings can be rebuilt, honey. What matters is that we're all alive. Max studied the two women in the firelight. Rose was clearly a woman of remarkable strength and resilience, and her love for Lily was evident in every gesture. Lily, despite her youth, had shown courage that would have done credit to a seasoned frontier veteran. "What will you do now?" Mac asked. "Do you have family somewhere? People who could take you in?" Rose was quiet for a moment. "I have a sister in California who's been asking me to come west for years, but the trip costs money we don't have. And starting over, Rose," Max said carefully, "I've got a proposition for you both, if you'll hear me out." Both women looked at him with interest. "I've been working as a trail guide and guard for wagon trains heading to California," Mac continued. "There's a group leaving from Tucson next week. Good people. Well-supplied, experienced wagon master. They could use someone to help with cooking and caring for the sick. The pay isn't much, but it would cover your passage and give you a start in California." Rose's eyes brightened with hope. "You think they'd take us on?" "I know they would," Mac said. "I'll vouch for you both." Lily looked at Mac with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What about you? Are you going to California too?" Mac felt something tighten in his chest at the question. Over the course of this one evening, these two remarkable women had somehow found their way into his heart. The thought of saying goodbye to them in a few days was more painful than he wanted to admit. "I hadn't planned on it," he said honestly. But maybe it's time I stopped drifting and found a place to settle down." As the three of them sat together in the fading glow of the fire, Mac found himself thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning, he'd been a lone wolf, accountable to no one and responsible for nothing but his own survival. Now, looking at Rose and Lily, he was beginning to understand that maybe the best treasures in life weren't gold or land or independence. Maybe they were the connections you made with people who needed you as much as you needed them. The end.